Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about, is your game concept worth building? You know, a strong idea and genuine passion aren't enough to carry a game forward. But regardless of your objective, your concept has to stand up to different forms of validation, from player responses to strategic alignment. So today, we'll explore what actually makes a game concept worth building by breaking down the signals that matter, how different objectives shape evaluation, and which principles and habits help validate ideas early. So we're going to be focusing on building durable proof that holds across perspectives, so when your concept is validated, your passion is ready to amplify it. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, and we're back. And today with us, I have Maru Kake. Hey Maru, how is it going? It's so good to have you here on the show.
Hey Andrew, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. We have this hint of spring coming and
Oh
it's feeling
yeah,
amazing.
we're get
Fresh air and sun and everything in Quebec. It's really great.
yeah. And for those of us in the northern hemisphere, we are definitely getting that spring fever, I think. But otherwise, Maru, as I said, is here with us today, and she is a producer, 3D artist, and designer. Worked on some really cool projects that I'm sure you'll have would love for you to kind of share a little bit of your history and other things that you do, because you're doing some freelance stuff as well. You're doing teaching. Maru, please share us a little bit about some of these projects you've worked on and things that you're doing now, and this whole teaching thing. Love to hear a little bit more about the work you do.
Yeah, I'm a little bit all over the place. I mean, as an indie dev, I kind of can't keep my focus on one thing, so I have to do many things. So my background, I actually started studying in cinema initially. And then I moved on to games because I really wanted to do a little more interaction. So I decided to become an environment artist, and that's what I studied into. And very quickly, I realized that the stylized work is really where my passion lies in. So I really like creating new worlds and colorful experiences and say something like kind of the indie flavor. So I really like that. So I studied in that, and then I was hired to do stylized environments. But very quickly, being in small teams, I took on more hats and more hats. So I started doing design and then project management and producing. So a little bit of all of that mixed together. And eventually I got an offer to do some teaching at the very university that I graduated from. So I started
Nice.
teaching there. It's kind of like a full circle. And I really like teaching as like a vocation on the side of studio work. So I do a lot of creatives and then a little bit of like giving back to the future generation of devs.
I absolutely love that. And those stories are like the best, right? The full circle ones too. And it's funny too when you called out to like your initial venture into filmmaking, for example, right? That was the same with me. I was, into like filmmaking, went to school for it, and then realized like, oh, I don't know, there's this extra layer of depth that games has that film doesn't. And, so it's really cool to hear your similar journey with that, at least that realization too. So wow, all really exciting stuff. I'm curious though, because between the teaching and all these other projects you're working on, everything else, what do you do in your spare time to unwind a little bit? Any hobbies or fun things you like to do?
Oh yeah, I mean many, but finding the time can be difficult when you juggle two or more jobs and contracts at once.
Yeah.
I do a lot of just art stuff, like unsurprisingly, like every other artist on this planet, I do like sewing, cosplaying, drawing, painting, anything under the sun. I've probably touched it at some point in my hobbies. Right now, I'm working on a like miniature kit that I'm building
Ah.
in my spare time. So that's kind of like anything that I can do that's taking me a little bit away from a screen, I try to do. Though I still play games, obviously. I try to stay up to date on those, but doing something with my hands is what I do in my spare time.
Awesome. Absolutely love it. And yeah, it's good to keep well rounded. I think there's a lot that can happen, inspiration, all sorts of great things. Now that we got to know you a little bit more, though, we want to push you a little bit further. And to do that, we are going to have you go right into the Q Box round. Folks, these are just some quick icebreaker style questions I prepared for Maru today. So, Maru, are you ready for the Q Box round?
I am so ready, Andrew. Give them to me. Let's go.
All right. First is, what advice would you give someone else that's just starting out?
Seek advice and feedback through your communities, be it a Discord server, be it your friends, your mom, your investors, audience, anyone under the sun. Seek feedback earlier than you think you might be ready to do. That's really how you're going to grow as a developer, as an artist.
Awesome. Next is, what's one habit you do to keep a clear and healthy mind?
I actually do a lot of daily journaling with an old ink feather kind of thing, and then I do that every day. It's helping me with mindfulness. It's helping me like unwind after a long day. And bonus point, I get to put little cute stickers on paper, and it's a very meditative experience in a way. So journaling, I recommend.
Oh man, I was gonna say I used to do that. I need to do it again, but it is. I realize it is very. You describe this, and it took the words out of my mouth. It is a very similar to like a meditative process because if you really think about it, it gives you the space for your to kind of like offload like all these thoughts in your head and stuff. No different than meditation, and it's not just like therapeutic. It really helps you. Again, gives you more space to think about bigger problems that you're trying to solve or things like that. So thank you for
Life
reminding me
gets
that I
so
should do it.
you should. Life gets so crazy. Like just getting time to put it down on paper, and it's kind of helping you absorb your life better than just
Yeah,
stumbling through everything, right?
absolutely. Great one. All right, next and the last one, but not the least, and also the staple here on the show is, what game are you playing now?
Right now, I am playing through the Spyro trilogy that's on Switch too. It was under like
Oh,
$20, and I'm going through it. And there's a charm
price
to
fine.
playing, just a little silly dragon collecting shinies. Like nothing convoluted, very simple, but very fun. So I'm loving. It's the first time I'm playing through Spyro. And on the side, alongside that, I'm also achievement hunting in Silksong, which is my favorite game. So I'm getting to the final achievements that I need to do. They're a little tougher, but slowly but surely I'm getting there.
Awesome. Appreciate sharing all those things with us today as part of our Q Box round. And yeah, and all the fun that you're having with revisiting Spyro. I think, or have you played the series before?
It's my first time
Ah,
actually.
okay.
It was long overdue. I was well in my time to play it properly. So I'm doing it now.
I love it. So good stuff. But again, thanks for sharing all that. And now, folks, let's get into the conversation. And like I shared earlier in the intro, we're going to be talking about, is your game concept worth building? And because let's face it, there's a lot of work and energy that goes into any of the projects that we create. But sometimes it's good to kind of like assess things and how and really understand how we should go about assessing because there's any number of directions we can go. So to kick things off, Brew, I want to kind of ask you this. Like when people ask, is this game worth building? What is it that they're really asking?
That's a great question. Honestly, we need to question ourselves, right? Who is people? Is it investors? Is it creatives? Who's asking that question?
Mm,
And the answer is going to change a lot depending on who that is. So, is this game worth building? In the case of an investor, is it worth putting money into that? And for creatives, is this game worth building? It's going to depend on what your goal is. Are you trying to be really artistic about it? Are you trying to do some creative expression? Are you trying to hire people and sustain your studio? That's really going to change the answer. But I think there is that's the output side of things, but there's also a human side to that question. Is this game worth building? Are you ready to invest blood, sweat, and tears and spend maybe 2 years of your life on that project? without feeling as absolutely miserable, you know? That's the kind of question. But I think the bottom line is people asking, is this game worth building? Are asking, am I properly equipped to reach my goal? And that goal might vary depending on who's asking.
I love how you like called out to that right away. It's like it really depends on who's asking the question, because I think a lot of times at face value, when let's say we as creators, as game devs and such, ask that, like, and if we ask that, we're looking at it more internal facing, right? We're looking at ourselves, and we might look at things like, well, is there demand in the market, or however we might approach it. But a lot of it will be internal. But right away, you're like, who is asking this question? And it just opened things up completely to be like, as other partners, other people who could be on the team, investors, like any number of people, and then it really puts things into this holistic perspective that a lot of the times we don't think about too often. And I think that's really revealing in terms of what types of things we should be thinking about when we do ask that question, is a game worth building? And I want to dive in more to this, because that concept, that phrase that we're using here, worth building, how would you say that may change depending on your objective, funding, sustainability, the expression, or just the strategy for the studio down the road? How do you think worth building can change?
Well, the word building, like let's say we take the funding that you mentioned. Is it worth building? I want to get some funding. I need to have that money in, right, to make that game happen. So you're going to be ready probably to make some compromises to fit the funding requirements. I'm going to take a very specific example here. When we did apply for the Canadian Media Fund, the CMF, we knew that the CMF had an interest in the Canadian culture throughout their project. So what we did, we took our project and we kind of made some compromise and tried to adapt it to the criteria to get said funding. And that's how you can make it worth building. It's worth building for them, it's worth building for you. It's kind of this sweet middle spot where you can make things happen and be beneficial for both sides. So in a funding perspective, you're going to be ready to adapt your project a little bit to meet the funding requirements. So again, as you mentioned, thinking outwards a little bit and seeing, okay, what is this investor and funding partner looking for, and how can I meet them in the middle, while also obviously keeping the core identity of your project. If you think about word building and like the creative expression, that's kind of like keeping that core, that sacred core of your project, and not losing yourself in these compromises. So it's a very like balancing act, I'd say. And okay, we want to maintain this project and not to warp it in a way that it's not even my project anymore. But also we want to adapt it so everyone involved can see the worth in the project. And for the long-term studio strategy, let's say you're at the third, fourth game making, the question is going to change more on the brand identity, I believe. So building an expertise, like if you're into multiplayer games with cute animals, you want to build upon that expertise because you have that special thing to offer to the world. And then you want to make sure to convert your audience from previous games into your new game. So that's how you know that it's worth building for your studio when you're on the long term as well. So there's a lot of different aspects that you could change the word building, but that's some avenues basically that's going to change your project.
Yeah, I absolutely love how we can go down and see how all these different things, can mean different potential outcomes that we're looking for. And they also change in time too, because this long-term studio strategy is going to change, is going to adapt throughout the years. But what your goal right now, let's say doing a personal project, is going to be different in terms of how we identify or define what worth building is. I mean, pre recording, we were even talking about like different types of creative expression, right? Like I mentioned how sometimes I like something more tangible, like actually doing like artwork or whatever. And in terms of if we just take that little interaction we were talking about, right? At that time, what I was, I guess, articulating in that moment of time was, what's worth building for me now? What's going to scratch that itch? And in that time, it was something more creative, faceted. So it can look in various different ways from an expression standpoint, like you called out, but also from a business practical one too. And again, that's where it comes a little tricky, is that the balancing act or some of those compromises that you're trying to identify too, to like, hey, how can you scratch that itch, but also like progress as a business too?
Yeah, make money. I think a core point is really be honest about what success looks like for you, as you described. Is it scratching that itch, that creative itch, that message that you have to send out to the world? That's your definition of success. So once you have that, write it down and refer to that when you don't know where to take your project, and that's how you're not going to lose yourself and make sure that it's going to be worth it for you in the long run, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious now. You mentioned a little bit about the Canadian Media Fund and whatnot, and and you received that funding, and if I remember correctly, was that for that was like for pre-production funds? Because folks, Canadian Media Fund, it's not just that they give money, but there's like different stages and things like that, and there's like pre-production, there's production, for example, and so those funds you received were for the pre-production, correct?
Yes, absolutely. It was the prototyping fund. So
Okay, thank you.
you have to make like the high level concept, the idea, and then you have a little bit of money to make the prototype and then see if it really works out.
Okay. So you received that funding and everything. And I would say that would be a really good, strong signal in terms of, hey, we received funding for this particular project and stuff. That's a good signal in terms of a signal, also meaning like validation point, where we've got this concept. We've now been rewarded money for this concept. It's putting on us the right path. Now, let's say further down, whether you're applying for additional funding through the next step of the CMF program, or let's just say putting the word out there too. How could these different signals that we might receive, provide us with different conclusions in terms of what's validated and what's not? And what patterns should teams specifically look at instead of reacting emotionally, whether it's a negative outcome or a positive outcome? And maybe you could share some experiences that might relate to these positive or negative outcomes.
I love that you're pointing out like how developers tend to react emotionally, because that's true. It's our baby, right? And we want to make it
Yeah.
happen. And it's so important to be able to kind of step back from that part of you after you've reacted emotionally. So a common pattern, like no matter how the feedback is positive or negative, there's this thing that Thierry Boulanger, which is the founder of Sabotage Studio, who made Sea of Stars, one of my favorite game, he said something that really answers that question, I think, and it's, did the person understand the idea of your game? Did they understand the concept? Because if they did and they didn't like it, it's not for them. They understood what you wanted to make and it's just not a fit. And that's totally okay, even if the feedback is not positive. It's also totally okay because it's not for them. But if they didn't understand it, and that's where you really understand, like, okay, that's a pattern, like they didn't understand my idea. So rather than being in the reaction of, oh, they said this and that about my game and my game sucks and whatever, instead of that, it's like, oh, they didn't understand properly what I was saying, and okay, how can I pass my message so it's understood? And then you have the proper data to know if your project is on track or not. So I think that's something to look out for, definitely, if the person understood the idea correctly of your project. And as for like examples, well, at first, like for a previous game, Jumping Jazz Cats, we had this game, and it's a kind of crazy idea out there of mixing a party game with mini games and song modifiers, and it's something completely new that we did. And it's a great little game, if I do say so myself, but it's a little hard to explain. Like, this elevator pitch is not really easy to give because it's a kind of unique piece of media. So we realized down the line that, okay, well, people don't really understand what the game is until they really see it. So that's a way that, okay, when they gave feedback, I need to make sure that I do more introduction, show videos maybe so they can understand it. And then I'm on track to process said feedback.
Yeah. And I actually love that whole like process that you realized and went through, and such a good example provided by the sabotage the Sea of Stars crew, because it's like it's right. It comes down to, and I know we talk about a lot here on the show, is like that level of clarity. And do they understand it or not? And that distinction is so important, because when we sometimes get emotional, which of course we're going to have our moments, it's going to happen, but if we can look beyond that and really ask, okay, but what about it is it that they did not like for some reason? And I think how you phrase it, and well, I don't know, take it for what it's worth, folks. But like, if you just reframe that whole scenario, whatever it might be, as asking, did they understand it or not? Because what it does is it's brilliant, because it creates a simple logic form that you can follow. So did they understand it? Yes or no, right? Okay. Yes. Then we go, okay, was it a good fit? Meaning, was that your ideal or intended audience or not? And if it's not, that's okay, right? And then maybe you could go further down that tree and be like, okay, was it how I communicated? Was it some of the messaging? Was it other factors that might have gotten someone who was not a good fit, but they at least understood what was there, right? Maybe, who knows? But then if no, and you just provided your an example too of that regard, then it's like, okay, well, maybe something else needs to be happen. So I am tailoring this to the right audience, to the right fit, because as long as it's communicated well, you should be, the goal obviously is you should be able to find those good fit. There's going to get people who, get filtered in that aren't supposed to. That's going to happen anyways. But you should be able to identify that. But if you're not asking those questions, and if we're acting reactively, that could be that could be a very big challenge, and just make it that much hard to really understand and comprehend what these signals, what these validation points really are.
Totally. And you've also mentioned something about finding the right people to pitch to. You also have to remember, as a developer pitching a game, that your evaluator, no matter who you're pitching to, they have different agendas themselves. It's a kind of like a lens changing how they interpret your project. So if you go to a specific publisher, they're going to try to see, is it going to fit in my calendar? Is it going to fit with the style of game that we do? Is it fitting in the genre? All that kind of questions. And that's how, when you understand the motivations of your evaluator, that's when you really know, okay, they gave that, they were coming from that point, and I understand that's okay, that's not for them because X, Y, and Z. So you can analyze the feedback a lot better. And one thing I like to do specifically, I write down everything, right? Every piece of feedback, even if I don't think it's relevant at all, I write everything down. And once I get back home from a convention or the playtest or whatever, I compare it against my design pillars, like that's been made much, much more ahead of time. So I take the feedback and does it fit with the core concept of the game? And that's also another way that you can check, did they understand the concept? And even if they didn't, if they said stuff that they interpreted as not being part of the core design pillars, then definitely that's something that you can improve on your communication right off the bat. So comparing those two is really a great way to process that feedback one step further than just, okay, I have that feedback, what do I do with it now? You can clearly identify what works in that feedback and what doesn't work, if it aligns with your goals or not.
Yeah, and such good points there. And I really like to call out the one they mentioned about the publishers too, because it goes right back to our earlier question, like, well, who's asking if this is worth building? In that perspective you gave of the publishers, this is why one of the things that's so important, if you are looking for a publisher to partner with, doing research on who they are, because it can't just be viewed as publisher and it's all encompassing of all these different possibilities of different publishing companies, right? And then thinking it's a yes or no answer, right? Because the reality is what you just said. Does it fit into my calendar? Does it align with our portfolio, our beliefs, what we're focused on? Like, there's so many other variables and factors that, and we can't just say at the end of the day, if the answer is yes or no, meaning yes, let's continue to have conversations, or no, we're not interested. It can't just be distilled to those two factors. There's so much more to consider and put in and move with, and use that as helpful information to go forward. Started touching on this a little bit too. And when we're in these points, moments of our lives, of our journeys as developers and stuff, and we're getting all sorts of these signals. What do you think are the ones that are like really key and matter the most, regardless of who's judging or evaluating our project? What are the key things that we should really hone in on more than anything?
So no matter who's asking, it's kind of what we were saying before. Are they confused about your idea? They understand it? That's what I was saying earlier. Another example I can give for that, when I was applying for the CMF, I was really trying to fit in their criteria. So they have this list, this grid of criteria to judge your project from. And in my documentation, in my application, I really made sure that very obnoxiously I was referring to their specific criterias and answering them. And that's my teaching background, I guess. That's like making it easy for people to give you points. And even if it's not a point system, give you points and back you. You want to make it as easy and as clear as possible. So a pattern that you can look at for a signal is definitely, are they confused, and how can you reduce confusion as much as possible? And another one on the negative signals would be if they're not engaging at all with your idea. So whether if it's a friend and you're just sending them to your elevator pitch and whatever, if they're not asking follow-up questions and trying to poke at your idea, and you're just like blabbing on and you're passionate about your project and they're not replying, no matter what they're saying, the non-verbal is also saying like, okay, their idea is not intriguing enough because people are not interacting. So it doesn't matter if you're a publisher, another dev, an audience member, a gamer. If they're not interested in your idea, then you probably need to work a little more on your project. On the other side, though, if you look at the positive signals, if someone is asking a lot of questions about the game, and like the big thing for me is like if they can build upon your ideas. So at MIGS, when we were pitching, we had a great reception for our second project. And we had publishers actually suggest ideas for the progression systems of our game that we didn't even think about, but they could see themselves adding those features in the game, and that's always a positive thing. And if you have an Instagram post and a user is just saying ideas for the game, it doesn't matter if the idea is good or not. If the fact that the person is engaging with your content and building upon it, that's very special, and that's a great sign.
And I love that you called out too, because I think there's an important distinction you just made there too. It's not about the idea. So let's say the idea is a great one. They're like, oh wow, where's this coming from? Don't misread the signal around the idea or whatever, right? Because you could potentially get caught in that moment for whatever reason, but it's really about the engagement and the fact that someone is, it's not about the idea itself, or let's say if there's multiple ones or whatever, it's more about the actual engagement there. Someone invested their time to come and engage and do everything else from whatever else they could be doing. And that's like, I think the real value that you're calling out here to that signal, as opposed to what it might specifically be communicating. It's really about the act itself.
Oh, absolutely. Like just taking that step back, there's almost a psychological aspect to things, right? Like when you talk about your idea and you just listen to what the person is saying, again, like even if it's nonverbal, like how much they seem interested, they interact with your idea, even without all the actual content, just the way that they deliver that message, that underlying message of the excitement that they might show, the way that they react, that's like a human element that we often just don't interpret at all. But I think it's really important to gauge that. So when I pitch my game, I pitch the content and all of that, but I also have like a part of my brain that's always connected to the person in front of me and trying to understand, okay, how are they reacting? Oh, they're reacting positively to that part, so I'm gonna like lean in a little more in this and that, reacting to how the person, like that connection, I think is really, really important and easy to miss when you're more in your world of ideas as a dev. So taking that step back is a really powerful tool at your disposal that anyone could do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, as you were saying that, it reminded me of a time I was helping a developer showcase a game at an event, physical event. And one of the things I was preparing for as the marketer was, all right, here are like three sentences that we could use, and one leans a little bit more into this idea, and another emphasizes this aspect or mechanic of the game. And so we had kind of three things, and I wouldn't try to like interchange three of them throughout the event at because that just is, I stuck with one, try that, and then I just did the other one. And the subtle change between them was in most cases like a word or a 2-word phrase that really emphasized a core point or aspect of the game. And what I realized is through that repetition and stuff and just watching people how they reacted, because here's an environment where everybody's busy, they have a schedule, they might want to attend an event or whatever, so it has to be quick. And this is important to consider in any situation, because you don't want to take false negatives, let's say, because someone's busy in the moment and they might not communicate that with you when you're pitching or it's just sharing ideas. But what was happening here is I went through a sentence and then just saw how they reacted. And that's it. And if there was those follow-up questions like you called out too. And then when I switched to the next one, sometimes I could see patterns emerge where people would like, oh, like they would perk up at that word or perk up a little bit more after I deliver the sentence. And those are just simple little things that anybody can do. And what's great is, here's the thing, it's like we don't talk about like friends, family, or maybe people not even into games or whatever. But if you can, and it's a lot of work to get to this point, but if you can succinctly put it into this simple idea as a sentence and pitch it to anybody, their general reaction is going to be a good, at least, signal or indicator of whether people would be interested or not. And then you go to your ideal crowd and everything else and then hone in. But I love how you called that out, because it just, again, reminded me of the process that I've used before in some cases where like, hey, how can we use this information in a very simple, basic structure that any of us can execute on? We don't need all these like tools or resources and stuff. I mean, yes, it takes time to get to that point, but it just goes to show how there's a lot of signals we could take from these types of interactions.
Yeah, I mean, exactly as you said, no complex plan. You don't have to make this pie chart or anything. You just go in there and listen to what the person is saying and reacting. And I love that you mentioned also like having different sentences that you could try out, like this kind of A/B testing, and not sticking with your initial idea. Maybe you have multiple that you're trying and you're testing and you see the difference, and that's how you get to that perfect sentence elevator pitch with testing. And it can be applied to more than just the elevator pitch. It can be applied to just the thumbnails, the concept art, like anything. You expand that and you take that same very simple core idea and just see how people react to it. Like one thing that I do with my playtests, it's a little further down the ideation stage, but I tell everyone that plays our game that they can quit the game at any time that they want. And just that, giving them the permission to quit it at any time that they want, it's also a signal. And I'm testing, okay, is it working even if they don't have to play just because they're my friends or they're helping me out? Like I tell them quitting the game is as much information as playing the game in some ways. So it's all that kind of stuff that you can apply with just observe the person to who you're pitching the game. And that's how you get a lot of unsaid information that you can process later.
Oh, I think that is such a good tip, by the way. Like just giving them the permission and setting that expectation and being like, by the way, you can quit at any time. And think about it. What does that do in whatever environment where someone is, especially if you're observing directly, that just says like, okay, I don't feel like I have to commit to this anymore than what I'm interested in. And I think that is going to provide so much more helpful information than if you don't set that expectation. But why would we like almost willingly say, hey, you can quit anytime? Like, no, we want them to play. But it's so smart. It really is. But it sounds counterintuitive too.
But it's crazy because oftentimes we don't think like playtesting is really interesting because people that playtest want to be cool and they want to be helpful. And as designers and business person, when we look at those people, we want to gain the right information. Against this idea of false positive that you could get is very present. So what you want to do is really, okay, well, thank you for being here. You can quit at any time. I'm not going to be offended. It's going to be really helpful. I'm going to analyze why you quit. Like that's more info. I had this situation in a playtest once where another dev came in and she was doing fantastic commentary and she seemed to be having a great time. And I wanted to check if like the personification of an element of her game was working well. So she was like voice acting and all. I was like, oh wow, she really likes the game. And when I asked her that question, I was like, are you doing that because it's fun, or are you doing that because you're just wanting to perform, you know? And she told me, actually it's because I'm performing. And I was like, oh, okay, that I'm glad that I dug further than that. So that's exactly the same idea. So I think the bottom line here is really look at the person, and the lack of engagement is really, really telling, no matter who's checking it and no matter the situation. Engaging or not engaging and for the right reasons is really going to tell you a lot about the potential of your project.
Yeah, it's so important, and exactly, and you know that's another important point too, in terms of when we're talking about the potential of something, right? Because let's face it, like some of these things that we're talking about, they could be hard to do because we get into these habits or beliefs or stuff. And when it comes to potential, I mean, I think it's important, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on what is the difference between that potential and proof, especially when you're in a stage as early as a concept stage. Like, how can we differentiate between the two? Because at this point, we might not have much proof and we just only have potential, but how can we move forward?
You know, Andrew, I really love that question. It's such a common misconception, I think, that you start up at the concept stage and you don't think that you can have any proof, right? It's just an idea. So, how can you come to get some proof out of even just the concept? There are ways for sure. And I think when we talk about potential, we're really talking about emotions. We're talking about this idea and this cool passion that we have. And when we talk about proof, we're more talking about the planning, the actual realization of that potential. So the goal really is to turn that potential into proof. I might be a kind of an idealist here, but I really think that any idea can have potential, but getting it to that proof stage is really difficult. So what you can do to turn that potential into proof is to really do proper research, checking into your audience, identifying your target audience, splitting them into clusters, motivators, like we worked with you, getting that audience validation, doing your game design document is something that a lot of devs, especially in indie, we're kind of like, oh, whatever, the GDD. But actually doing it and identifying the pillars, like I was saying earlier, that's all research that you can build from the idea into proof. And that research, in my opinion, kind of shows commitment and seriousness into taking that world of ideas where everything is good and works out and then putting it on paper, and now okay, you're getting serious about this. For instance, when we made our GDD, at first we did it for just the publishers because we were like, oh, they're going to ask us about that. But when we started actually putting the ideas down, we realized that there were some problems with the world of ideas and everything that works. And we were able to fix those. So it shows thoroughness and seriousness that converts the potential into a project that can actually exist. And then you can create your milestones, your tasks. You can really see how it's going to unfold along production if you do get to that point. So I think that's how you do it. You do your research, you write it down, you identify your pillars, you make sure that you can process your data properly. You really are attentive at reading what the project is and isn't and how you're gonna adjust moving forward. So that's how you can really make this potentially this idea become more than that in an actual game, even without coding anything.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like, yes, it does. Everything that we're talking about does require some level of work, but it's not really overly complicated or anything else. It's just a matter of I have this belief, and now I just at least want improve, especially in a concept stage, as you're calling out. It is really just other types of data that is other signals, and we're kind of compiling them together to make a case, right? And we can get that from like qualitative research, quantitative research, like all those things. And that's all we're doing. We're kind of like just building that case, right? We have this passion, idea, belief in something. Now we need to support it. And that's ultimately what we're doing here. but in that process too, again, I say we have behaviors and habits and all these things. Are there any particular or even more detailed ones that help teams validate these ideas further before fully committing to going right into production? Because again, the risk there is if we don't do that process, we could be building something that will burn out from or not amount to anything. And that's not a position anybody wants to be in.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, it's not complicated. Everyone could do it. Everyone can get those proofs and they can form these habits to make sure that it's successful. And a lot of times devs, in my opinion, indie devs tend to skip that step, but they could really gain from it. So what habits can you actually build to validate your ideas before committing and spending years and being miserable and not selling, and then you have to close your studio? That's the slippery slope that you can go in. But there are things you can do. It's not just a roll of the dice. So what you can do is to first and foremost talk about your game, test your pitch, test it with multiple people, gauge your reaction like we were saying. And then once you have that, you split the data and you refine it. One thing we like to do at our studio is to build 12 different pitches, like the elevator pitch, high level concept really. And we pitch it to multiple people, and then we reduce to like 6, and then we reduce to 3. And we really start with like an open mind about not this one idea. So we do this kind of funnel effect, right? So we start with that. And then we iterate on that idea. So let's say before going into production, you're going to want to make your prototype come to life a little bit. So you're going to work in iteration with your pitch, your high-level concept, your first playable, your vertical slice, and so on. So you're going to want to do some technical de-risking with the game, like can we actually make that game? But also you're going to want to see if with something like the very simplest core of your game, can you make that work? Can it be fun? So let's say you identified your core pillar in your design. Okay, cool. Every week you kind of play test that, you analyze that. And then you make that feature, like let's say you're making a game about the raccoon stealing trash. Is the raccoon stealing trash fun without adding a bunch of like meta progression and whatever? Like just this very simplest idea, take that and stick with it, like focus on that core. And then playtest it and show it online as early as you can, earlier than you think you should show it online. Because the reality is that keeping your idea secret is not going to help you anymore. Like it might have been before, but today you have to show it as early as possible. So have something that looks decent enough. Maybe you can fake certain parts if you need to, but show it online and then start getting those early validation. So a habit that you can form is really like showing it as much as possible. Every week, every 2 weeks, whatever works for your studio, really get in the habit of putting it in your schedule to show it to someone somewhere, because you're going to skip it. And then you're going to work for 2 years on something that you're not going to even know if it's fun. And down the line, you're going to be stuck with a lot of problems.
I absolutely love that concept. And I know for some of us folks, it's really hard to do. Putting ourselves out there, right? That could be a big challenge for a lot of us. But think of it this way, and it doesn't reduce that potential fear that we all will face at some point. Myself included. I know I put myself out there, but there's moments I'm scared, right? To put myself out there and stuff. We all have it. We're all human, right? But what Maru just said, if you really put it down in its most simplest form, by putting yourself out there, getting that feedback and stuff, you are creating data points. And the more data points you create, the more information you get. And the more information, I mean, you see how this progresses into, okay, this strengthens things. This gives me a better understanding. It does everything I need to move forward and progress. And everything else that you called out too is essentially a good way to stress test your concept. You high level break it down and can continue to go further. And I mean, I'm sure any of us there, just following those simple steps, we could probably effectively create a nice plan within like 3 to 6 months to where to start, where to narrow it down, and then execute on those things. Meanwhile, like you said, put it out there and get those data inputs, because I like hockey, so I'm going to use a Wayne Gretzky quote here if I don't butcher too much. But I mean, one of the famous quotes he said is like, geez, and now I completely lost it for train of thoughts. But basically he said is the only shot missed is the one you don't take, I think. And meaning, yeah, you're not going to score every shot, but the point is, in order to score, you need to shoot on net. And the more times you shoot on net, the more chances you have of getting that goal. And what we're saying here is the more input you have, the greater it's going to improve that possibility and keep you going towards success than if, let's just skip that. Because if Wayne Gretzky never shot on net, do you think I would be mentioning his name today? Probably not.
Yeah, and I love that what you're mentioning, because if you don't try to show it, like that's a very like audience oriented like angle, but if you don't even try to show it and you reach the end, okay, right, you have this beautiful project that you worked on and you're at the very end, and that's when you start revealing it to your audience. Maybe you don't even know how to show that idea to your audience, so testing it really early, like not only showing it and then okay, I'm done, but you test it and then you see how well it's performing. That's gonna show you exactly how you should go about for your release and your final marketing beats. And it's the same thing with the game itself. If you don't test it at all, and you test it towards the end of release, and then that's when you do your stress test, your reviews, you might realize at the end that, oh, people don't like it. They don't like this part. And
Yeah.
it's too late. I mean, it's too late. You spent like so much time making these features and you were heading towards a wall. So the best gift that you can give yourself as a developer, in my opinion, is really to show it as much as you can and try to show it and be kind of brave. Like you were saying, it's hard sometimes. It's vulnerable to share it, but share it and be ready to take that feedback and analyze it. I've seen studios having community manager for the longest time and they don't even analyze the conversion rate of their post to the wishlist count. And that's the kind of stuff like, okay, be on top of those data. Like if you're making Instagram posts and you're jumping on every trend, okay, that you might have a lot of views and a million and whatever. But if they don't convert into like wishlist, what's the point of spending all that time? How's the right approach to talk with your audience? How's the right approach to make your game? What are people really loving that you could focus more on? And maybe those features that you had in mind in your big grand scheme, an idea of your project, maybe they're not needed if people like to do X in your game and you're doing Y instead, you know? So it's really important that you put it out there and you listen and observe what the reaction is and not just put it, okay, I did my job. I play tested it. Okay, right. What did the playtest give you? How can you use that and affect the production of your game? I think that's one thing that I see the most, both in students and in experienced developers. It's like, okay, can you analyze the feedback and the data that you get?
And one last point I'll call out to, all great things there. And what you said earlier is just make sure it's fun for you too. Because there's nothing worse than going along in their project. And even let's say it's got great potential, you're validating and everything else, but man, do you hate it? Because that's not going to help either at all, especially if you're in a good position, if you don't have fun with it. And again, we talk about burnout in this industry a lot in different ways, but I think at surface, it deals with a lot of cultures and things like that. But at a more granular side, it also has to deal with like you just doing the same thing over and over again. Make sure you damn well like it, because if you don't, it's going to be really taxing. And I hate it when I see people that have such passion and then that it slowly drains because they didn't really do something that was completely true to them. And that also means sometimes having a hard conversation and decision to make whether you continue with it or not, because what's at the end of the day is important that you're doing something you believe in and have fun with and gives you energy, right? Because if you don't, it's not sustainable if there's anything going against it.
We're just making silly games at the end of the day. That's what I tell my students. We're just making silly games, and obviously it's our life. It's the way we put food on the table in a lot of ways, but also it's just a silly game. So you should find ways to have fun. I love what you're mentioning here. And it kind of refers back to the start of our conversation where we were saying, what does success looks like for you? If your goal is to make something from your heart, and you're being realistic about it, you're not trying to make the blockbuster game. If you're just wanting to make an art and do it for you, then that's going to change how you interpret that feedback and how you modify your game. So I think that's really important. Just know, what do I want to get out of that, and not lose track of it and get lost, because everyone is going to try to pull the blanket towards their side, and
Oh,
at
yeah.
the end you have to do what's right for you. So burnout is a real thing, and if the game, even if the game has potential, if you're not happy with it, you should totally just find a way to make it yours. I love that you're mentioning that's so important.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's you doing this. And if you're not helping yourself out, then how could you possibly help or serve others? It's like,
They're just silly games.
yep, they're just
If you
silly
speak from
games.
your heart, they're it's gonna show. So if you love what you do, all that we've mentioned, all the plans, the habits, the planning, the whatever, is gonna be so much easier for you to do than just struggling through it. And every new comment is gonna grind at your gears and like, oh, this is one thing that I need to do. Like, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be miserable. Like, don't do that to yourself. But it's just a hard wake up call. Sometimes it's so important to ask yourself that question. So, folks, and listening to the podcast, I'd like to say, like, do yourself a favor, think about what you're doing right now, and is that your definition of success? And if it is, then great, good job. And if it's not, then how can you align the project or yourself to fit together? And that's the biggest gift you can give to yourself.
Oh, such a good piece of advice, whatever there. I absolutely love that. Good call out, Maru. Well, I know we're coming on time here, and we've talked a lot. What are some takeaways people could get from our conversation today that you'd want to highlight?
3 things that I want to highlight. So, identify what success looks like for you and your team. Define the core identity of your game and stick to it. Don't dilute your game and your expressivity for someone else. And closely observe the reactions to your project, especially the unsaid, what we were saying about earlier. What people don't say, the way that they convey their feedback, that's going to give you a lot of information. So do these 3 things consistently, and I think you're set on track for success.
Awesome. Well, can't thank you enough for sharing those points, and honestly, our entire conversation is very enlightening and everything else. And I think it puts things in a lot of different types of perspectives for us, and it just is just greatly appreciated. Now, Maru, if anybody wants to reach out, connect, or learn more about some of the projects or anything else like that, what are some links you can drop, and how can people connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have my LinkedIn that's going to be linked, so please check it out if you want to, if you're curious about anything, if you want to work together. I'm always open for freelance, for either production advice or more artistic side. So anything really, I'm pretty open to that. So reach out to me by LinkedIn, and there's also my email if you want to. And soon enough, I'm gonna start sharing some part of my own personal project, my game project that I'm working, my little candy on the side. So you can look out
Awesome.
for that. And I'm gonna share a lot of the behind the scenes and me struggling with being a solo devs and learning a lot of silly things. So that's gonna be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for you on this new journey, or one of multiple paths that you have. Maru, I can't thank you enough for today. It has really been a treat.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for having me. It's been a great time, and thank you for putting that information out there for everyone. That's a pleasure, really.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.